Well, welcome everyone to Steve Savant's Money, the name of the game. I'm your host, Steve Savant, syndicated financial columnist and money color commentator. On today's show, Knowing Your Spending Number, part one in our series on the Journey Guide to Retirement with mathematician and software creator, Michael Smith. Welcome to the show, Michael.
Thanks, Steve.
Okay, Michael, you have a bachelor's in math. You
Yes.
have a master's in math.
Correct.
So you are all in on the mathematician. I have a lot of things I'd love to ask you just on the math issues.
Sure.
But you also spent some serious time at Goldman Sachs where you actually invented, and it's patented,
Correct.
this mathematical modeling for high-end clients. Give me a little bit about that.
Sure. So I spent 16 years at Goldman Sachs. I was actually building trading and asset allocation modeling tools. And the patent is actually on an asset allocation optimization technique. And so that's something that we've actually incorporated, some of those concepts and ideas in what we're doing today.
Just a quick question.
Sure.
Is that similar to something like a Monte Carlo model? Or is
It
that
is.
It
Yeah,
is
it's a similar concept. That's correct.
So if you know Monte Carlo, maybe that's a little jump.
That's
and
right.
if you're watching this show today and you say, Steve, I'm an advisor, I don't even know what Monte Carlo is, just call me and I'll send you stuff from Backroom Technician to cover that off easily. Now listen, there's a lot of financial software. I've even contributed to certain financial software. Why did you go out of your way to invent this? There's a lot of good programs out there.
So in the genesis of what we're doing here is we're challenged by Tim Ash from Ash Brokerage to look at guaranteed income streams, so specifically annuities, and seeing do those actually contribute? Do they help or hurt a retirement plan? But actually looking at it from a mathematical perspective.
Did you have a product disposition against annuities coming from Goldman Sachs?
Absolutely.
So you were negative all in.
Coming from the investment world, absolutely. I was actually set to disprove that annuities actually fit in a plan.
So what's it like to have a philosophical disposition against annuities and then run it on your own platform?
Oh, it was quite an eye-opening experience.
Okay. So, but not only did you do that for the discovery process for product bias, or in this case, whatever built-in prejudice some registered investment advisors and security licensed people have, but there's some other things that go along in this program that really demonstrate for the client, which is our end user ultimately,
That's right.
that really demonstrate things that no other software does demonstrate. Isn't that correct?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Well, let's talk about that.
Sure. So what we'll do is we'll actually go through a sample client, and I think that's the best way of actually illustrating what we're doing here. And so the sample client that we'll look at today, it's Joe and Mary. And so they're 61 and 62 years old. They're going to be retiring next year. And so you can see that we can indicate what state they're in, and they have a retirement spending goal. So this is important, a spending goal of $100,000. And so we also will be looking at, okay, can we actually make this plan all the way through to a target age of age 95?
And they gave you that 100,000 spending. That's
correct.
number.
That's correct.
Okay, all right.
That's correct. And so it's simple entry, demographic type of information, and some simple
Very
goal.
straight up.
That's correct. And so we have 3 pages of information that we're including here. The next, we're looking at their investments. Now, something that we found from other applications is that it's very complex and cumbersome to actually enter the information. We've tried to make this as simple and straightforward as possible. So looking at their investment accounts, it's broken up depending on their tax situation. So looking at their qualified assets and then other investments and non-qualified assets. And for this client, they have a total of $2 million. They can indicate what those asset allocations are.
And the software is going to discriminate the tax issue, whether
Exactly.
it's taxable or non-qualified.
Exactly.
So it'll pick up basis maybe if we know the number?
Absolutely.
Okay.
So we're actually maintaining basis as we go along. We're understanding exactly what the tax consequences, and that's critical, Steve, because so many tools out there that may be simple to use are all pre-tax. They're not looking at one of the biggest impacts you can actually have in terms of your retirement planning, which is the taxation. So we have a fairly moderate allocation here. They're mostly 60-40. Then we look at their post-retirement kind of target asset mix. In this case, it's going to be 40-60. And then also including any advisory or product fees that may be needing to be taken into account. So once we have that, then the third and final input is dealing with income and expenses. So this is where the client would indicate, looking at the Social Security site and their statement, what is that FRA, the full retirement age benefit amount? They would indicate that here, so it's simple entry again. And when they're planning to take Social Security, so in this case, it's going to be 62 and 63. Again, this is what the client is really saying. This is my goal. This is what I'm thinking that I want to do. We'll have an opportunity to interact with the tool and see what the impact of changing that is in a minute. And then any other additional income that may be coming in. So in this case, they know that they're going to be selling a property in a few years. What are the proceeds of that? So we could add a one-time infusion of capital, whether it's pre-tax or after-tax. And then, or you could actually add in an annual infusion of capital. In this case, we'll just make it a one-time.
Okay.
And same thing with expenses. So if they know that they have a one-time capital expense, so they're going to be purchasing a car in a number of years, or a large purchase, we want to make sure it gets accounted for, we can include that as well. You can add as many of those as you feel needed. So this is a key aspect. Again, it's simple entry. All we're doing is just putting in for those 3 basic pages of information.
So this is simple, but it still is comprehensive. It's taking in the tax
Absolutely.
issue. Okay, is this tied into Social Security as well?
Currently, this is an entry point that the advisor would actually put in right there on the screen. So again, you're pulling it from Social Security. However, it's not an automatic type of feed.
All right, so basically the input's pretty straight up. We're talking about the tax ramifications as well.
Correct.
And we're being able to discriminate between qualified and non-qualified monies.
Correct.
All right.
Correct.
So if I want to start making adjustments, I know we're going to get into this throughout the week.
Sure.
But when we start making adjustments, we're going to be able to compare, hey, they could have taken their Social Security. They requested at 60 to 63, but you're going to say, but if you went to full retirement age, or even more, you went out to age 70.
That's right.
There's some demonstration here that they can actually look at the ramifications of delay.
That's right. And we take all of those things into account, and we're actually doing the calculation under the covers to see, is it actually better for Mary to take the spousal benefit at a certain point in time? So we're including all of that in the calculation.
Okay, I love simplicity with all the comprehensiveness happening behind the scenes.
Absolutely.
All right, now I want to ask you about this because, you're talking about 5,000 market simulations.
Yes.
I mean, I'm thinking, hey, we're back in Monte Carlo land, right?
That's right.
So talk a little bit about that's a big number, and why is that really important for us to look at those numbers?
Why does it matter?
Yeah, why does it matter?
So I think what I'll do, the best way of actually seeing that, the impact of that, is actually to go on to the next and see the result. So once we've actually entered the information, if we click on next, so what we're doing at this point is we're actually running those 5,000 simulations. I just ran 5,000 simulations.
In a nanosecond.
That's correct. Other tools that are out there will run up to 1,000 simulations. The reason why 5,000 is actually important, there's been quite a bit of research on this in terms of kind of what is that right number. And it turns out, and actually this is work that the Navy did, interestingly enough, in ballistic testing, that actually 4,000 is kind of a necessary number in order to make it within a particular percentile. So if you're running too few, you won't get an accurate reading, an accurate number. So what we're doing actually in this case, and the reason why you want to look at all of those different market conditions, because let's say that you actually are, right about ready to retire and it's 2008. Well, if you're looking at an average return in your calculations, an average return, say the S&P typically gets 7%, right? You're grossly overestimating. If you're only looking at an average return, you're grossly overestimating what that portfolio is actually going to produce.
Okay, so just to make sure I'm understanding this and our audience is from an advisor point of view.
Correct.
Averages sometimes are not what we're looking for because the mean is not going to really demonstrate reality. That's what I just heard you say.
And it's so critical to be able to understand this, Steve, because even if you're conservative and you're looking at, okay, say the average happens to be 7% from the S&P 500 in the past 30 years. And what if we're conservative and say, okay, we're just going to look at an average 5%, right? The advisor thinks, I'm much more conservative here. What we're they're not taking into account, even if we're looking at an average 5%, is that sequence of those returns. So for example, you can imagine a client is building up their asset amount, and they're kind of reaching that mountaintop, just about ready to retire. And if at that point in time, they hit an immediate cliff, say 2008 or 2001, we've experienced these, right, ourselves.
Right, definitely.
What happens at that point in time? You're no longer thinking about averages, right? You want to know, can I take that into account in my calculations? And that's what we're doing. We're looking at all of those different possible sequences of returns.
Well, listen, don't forget to watch our next segment on the importance of interactive co-planning, part 2 in our series on the Journey Guide to Retirement. And keep in mind, before moving forward with any of the ideas on our show, always check with your tax consultant, legal counsel, or your financial advisor. You've been watching Steve Savant's Money, the name of the game.